Welcome to episode 123. Are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime? No matter your destination, the travel specialists at 3D Travel Company are there to help. Just head on over to my website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click the Book Now button on the left-hand side to get your free quote today.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest is the voice of Timothy Mouse from the Dumbo ride, and he's the voice of Scuttle from Ariel's Undersea adventure. Now, for some reason in this episode, I kept calling it Ariel's Grotto. That is a meet and greet for the Little Mermaid, so I apologize for misspeaking the name during the interview, but I hope you guys enjoy these clips. The first clip is going to be of Timothy Mouse. It's actually our special guest doing it at a Comic-Con live. I couldn't find any raw audio of just the character itself and music playing, so I used that clip. And then the other one is actually a clip from the Ariel's Undersea Adventure ride, so I hope you guys enjoy.
Hi there, it's your friend Timothy Mouse. As you know, Dumbo is a real high flyer, so as to make your flight a safe one, mind your step as you climb aboard, and then be sure to stay seated with your seat.
Ladies and gentlemen,
boys and girls,
welcome to Who Did That Voice?
In just a moment, the show will begin. So please, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show, I am super excited to be bringing you an interview with Chris Edgerly. Chris, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it is my honor. I'm super glad we were able to carve out a little bit of time to get to chat. It's super exciting to talk with you today because there's some really cool things we're going to discuss. You know, the very first thing we like to do though, Chris, is get to know our guest on a more personal level. So tell me about little Chris, the boy who grew into the man he is today, and how did he become an actor?
I think it's probably a fairly common story. I was a bit of a cut up. I discovered early on that I could do different voices, and I used to amuse my brothers with them, and then with friends and strangers I would meet, and then you become sort of the class cut up, and it just naturally evolved. Although I was to the point where, you know, other kids were doing school plays and things like that in high school. I never did any of that. I wasn't quite, either I wasn't interested enough or maybe not quite confident enough to try it.
Yeah.
But by the time I was in college, I had friends tell me, you know, you ought to give this a shot. And so I started doing stand-up in college. And I was bringing all these different voices onto the stage with me. And I found that I got some pretty good crowd reactions from that. And basically that turned into a 10-year career as a traveling, touring stand-up comic. And all the while I had moved to Orlando, Florida by that time. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. And out of Orlando, I'd started to do a little bit of acting work, and I'd wanted to do more voice acting, and there was some available there. And this was in the 90s.
Okay.
And finally, I would say it was around 97, I got cast to do the Spider-Man voice in the Spider-Man ride at Universal's Islands of Adventure. And I did that and Jonah Jameson for that ride. And it took 2 years to get all that recorded. And in that 2 years, I moved to LA as a comic who wanted to get voiceover going, but I didn't know how to find an agent. And it took me until 2000 to finally get an agent. And
wow.
So, yeah, I know.
That's crazy.
A lot of it was because it might have taken less time had I really knuckled down and looked, but I was so busy touring that I wasn't in town enough to really apply myself. And funny enough, it was people at Universal Studios that had been working with me on theme park rides that got me the meeting with Pat Brady, she was at a smaller agency, still a pretty good sized one, but she is still my agent at CESD Talent, where I am now, along with many other agents. And she basically helped pluck me. She plucked me out of obscurity to a degree, and got me started in voice acting in Los Angeles in the biggest market there is. So there's, most people can probably trace how they got to the present day from their childhood, career-wise, in just a couple of moves, and I can do the same. That was the decision to try stand-up in college, the decision to move to Orlando and start doing a little bit of work there, the theme park rides that carried over to L.A., and that meeting they got me with the agent I have now. So it bounces around a bit, but it's not all that complicated. If you apply yourself and keep your options open, things happen.
Well, I think that's fantastic, Chris. I really appreciate you diving into your background and into your childhood and acting and how it all kind of came to be. You know, I hear Pat Brady's name so many different times. She has definitely been a woman that has left a huge impact on the voiceover community specifically, you know, and her husband, of course, being in the voiceover world himself. But there's just been countless people. Bob. Yeah, Bob, you know, I've had countless people on my show who have talked about Pat, and she is just a woman who's touched a lot of lives and really impacts people that, whether they know it or not, the people that they've been casted, the people that have been casted, she's had a huge role in playing, you know, into these characters that have become childhood favorites and classical, you know, voiceover actors that people remember for all time. So she's a woman who really knows what she's doing. And it's pretty exciting to hear a little bit more about her today.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, her husband, Bob Joel's, very talented voice actor in his own right, and who's done some voices on rides as well. If you go to a theme park in Los Angeles, you're probably going to hear Bob's voice at some point. Definitely at Disney.
Yeah.
And Pat, my nickname for her is the reason I have a career, because she is the reason I have a career. And the guys at CESD Talent are all great. Kathy Lizio in animation and video games, she's done a lot for me. Bo Burdall and Samit Iyengar in commercials. There's Vinny Buono in promos and trailers that I've done work for. Brittany Weiskopf is one of the junior agents who's becoming pretty busy over there too. So, and Paul Doherty, one of the names on the door. You know, they've all been there. And it's a long roster. I probably left names out, but it's like I'm accepting an award or something. I'm not, but anyone who may be listening that cares, you'll hear us talking to Trenton in these interviews, and you'll think that, wow, they did all this stuff on their own. We never do it on our own. We always need help. Absolutely. We need people looking out for us. We need people getting the auditions for us, guiding us. And those are just a handful of the people that mean a lot, you know, to my career.
Absolutely, Chris. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, like Chris said, if there's anyone he did mention, he's definitely thinking of you and you're definitely on his heart. Well, Chris, you know, it was funny that you mentioned the ride at Universal. You know, when I was a senior, we took a trip that was a Disney/Universal trip. And one of my favorite Universal rides is The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. And I did not realize until researching for this interview that you were Spider-Man and Jonah Jameson, but I've had Pat Fraley on the show, who was the Hobgoblin on that ride as well. So that was really epic because Pat's a sweet guy. Love him to death. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm going to have Spider-Man on the show today. So this is pretty cool. I absolutely love that ride. And it definitely stands the test of time. It's got a little bit of that classic 90s feel, but it still holds up today, which I love because that 90s cartoon that came out was fantastic. Done by John Simper and his team of amazing people. But I'm glad that you got to actually play Spider-Man. What was that like for you, Chris, getting to take on the web slinger himself and J. Jonah Jameson at the same time?
Oh, it was great. I mean, it was all happenstance because here I was in Orlando, and I carved out a little bit of a career there. There was some work there at the time. And this was around, I think it was about probably early 97, if not maybe even late 96. The guys at Sound Deluxe Studios in Orlando were working on this ride, and they knew me from a couple of local voice acting jobs I had done, and they said, hey, can you do some scratch tracks for us for this ride? So I did everybody on the ride, just their scratch stuff.
Wow.
And I would come up with different voices for each character, each villain, each hero. And then for Spider-Man, I thought, well, let me just do my voice because I'm not that much older than him. Because at the time I was about 27 and I sound young enough and I'm a bit of a smart aleck. And so I thought, okay, let me just be me. And so I was working with Scott Trowbridge. He was the director on that. I think he works at Disney now. And I would meet him once every few months, I guess, to do some new scratch tracks. And then one day, he had me in the studio, and he said, "So what are you doing next week?" I said, no plans. I think I'm doing something here in town." He says, "Fly out to L.A. I want to cast you as Spider-Man for the ride." I said, "What, really?" He goes, "Yeah, I've listened to everybody, and you're the one I want to do it." And so I had no idea that was even on the table. I never dreamed. I just thought they're using me for practice, and I'm getting paid a little bit. And then when I got out there, I found out, yeah, you're doing Jameson too. We really liked your Jameson. So we started recording, and over 2 years, I would occasionally come in and do a record for it. And, when you're in a smaller market like Orlando, and there are talented people there,
yeah,
but it's not the same depth of a talent pool as there is in Los Angeles. And so you get used to being sort of the big fish in that little pond, and you kind of become convinced of how talented you are. And then you come out to LA and you record with Pat Fraley and these other really talented voice actors, and you realize, wow, I'm just kind of one of I'm a face in a crowd here, because these guys were all amazing.
Yeah.
And it was fun watching them all do their characters too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a 2-year process, and then Scott took me to an early test of the ride before it was completely ready.
Oh, awesome.
And we got to walk through before everything was finished, and I watched the early screen that you see when you're waiting in line of J. Jonah Jameson talking to Peter Parker. And he looked at me and he said, "Let me get you out of here before you go schizo on me, because you're watching yourself talk to yourself." And it was, yeah,
funny.
But since, yeah, I had a chance to go on the ride a few times with just regular park goers when it was open, and no, I never opened my mouth and tried to ruin it for them. I just sort of enjoyed the ride with them and had a great time. And yeah, I agree. I'm biased, but I think the ride holds up. I think it's still a really fun ride.
Well, it's an amazing ride, and I've actually been dying to go back to Florida and take my wife, because she hasn't ridden it yet. And I was like, man, it was so fun back, and that was 2005 when I graduated high school. So it's been a long time since I've been to Universal. Yeah. But I was like, I know with Disney picking up the rights to Marvel and everything, Universal still retains their rights to what they have. So I'm glad that is not going to affect any of the current Marvel rides or attractions that they have there at Universal, because it's a really great ride. It's a blast. And the technology that they used, I think, was way ahead of its time. And now we start to see that technology used in a lot of different theme parks like Six Flags and other things. So it's wild how technology can be way ahead of its time and spawn other things down the line. So.
Oh yeah. I think at the time they were talking about how kind of unprecedented this was, the use of hydraulics like that. And you'd seen some of it on the Back to the Future ride.
Yeah.
And they combined that with screens that moved, and that you were moving through the cityscape, and so it felt even more immersive. And it is amazing that ride opened in '99, and it's insane. Coming up on 20 years.
I know. Yeah, next year. Wow.
I know.
Wow.
That is amazing, and yet it is. I think if you go on it, you still get the same rush, because the technology still works. I mean, it's still really effective.
Yeah. And it's a 4D ride, so you get a little bit more immersive experience. Flames, water in your face, it's just really, really fun experience. So if no one's ever ridden it before, you absolutely have to ride it. It's at Universal, and it's called The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man, where you can hear Chris as both Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and as J. Jonah Jameson, which is pretty funny because you play the nemesis and the good guy. So
yeah, that doesn't happen often.
No, it doesn't, that's pretty epic, that you got that opportunity. Well, Chris, growing up for you, were there any cartoons or shows or actors in particular who kind of inspired you as a kid maybe and kind of got you? I know you said as you were growing up there weren't necessarily a lot of inclinations for you to join the theater group and stuff, but were there any people that maybe even after like you got into college theater, were there people that kind of inspired you, or shows that kind of maybe motivated you towards voiceover?
Oh, sure. As a kid, and this is, I'm sure, a pretty standard answer that you get, but the Warner Brothers cartoons,
oh, yeah.
They're the best. And obviously Mel Blanc is the very top of animation voice acting. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever going to match what he was able to do.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the Disney animation a lot. It was a different kind of animation. It was really, really specific and very. It was almost epic when you looked at what Disney was able to do with its animation in theaters. And even I used to watch the Wonderful World of Disney every Sunday night back in the 70s and the 60s. That was on, and that was very popular. And we always loved when they would play Disney cartoons on that show. And so I loved all of those cartoons. I loved the Tex Avery cartoons.
Oh, yeah?
Which most of these cartoons are really on PC now, but it doesn't change the fact that they were wildly entertaining. And the voice work is amazing in those cartoons. And I mean, almost everything we enjoyed in the 70s is not PC now. It's just the way the world has changed. But it doesn't change the fact that they were so well done. And as far as movies go, I'm a big Peter Sellers fan. The guy was in an uncanny mimic. And that's something I gravitated towards. I'm a big fan of Rich Little. Obviously, if you loved impressions in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, Rich Little was one of the guys that you paid attention to. And by the time I was in college, I was looking at what some other comics were doing. And at that time, I think as far as comedy goes, I don't know if I'd picked a favorite comic. I was still discovering my own style, but I think I just sort of absorbed everything at that point, because by the time you're going on stage, everything you've absorbed in your life up until that point goes, sort of into your material, whether you know it or not. And so I was a movie buff, and I would see movies all the time, and whatever I could see, I would just sort of soak it all in. So, I mean, early on it was more specific, but by the time I really just came to love movies and TV, I would watch as much of it as I could.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I'm a huge buff when it comes to cartoons and movies, and just the entertainment industry itself was always a very fascinating thing for me as a young man, and it's not gone away at all as I've gotten older, so.
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever go away. I think you find something in it that resonates, and you keep going back to it.
Well, Chris, we were talking about Disney a little bit and how it inspired you as a child and as a young man growing up. And what has it been like for you to take on not one, but two iconic Disney characters as you voice both Timothy Mouse for the Dumbo ride and Scuttle for the Ariel's Grotto ride?
It's great. I mean, it would be exactly as you would imagine. It's an honor. And Timothy was the one that I got first. I think that was around 15 or 16 years ago that I auditioned for that and got it. And I remember listening to the original clips that they played for me as a reference and thinking that, Timothy sounds a little bit like Curly from the Three Stooges. He's a different voice actor, but there's a lot of the same rhythms and texture there. And it was funny because that never really left me. And even though I'm not trying to sound like Curly, I'm trying to sound like Timothy. But sometimes you notice that some characters just sound like other famous people.
Yeah.
And I've never forgotten that. And they use that for the ride, and I've done it for like a little small project here and there. But for the most part, it was mostly done back then, and it just still runs today. In fact, I had my wife and kids with me at Disneyland just this past Wednesday. And my kids are small enough to where they're still not comfortable going on most of the rides, but they hear Daddy's voice sometimes. And so we walked by the Dumbo ride. And as we walked by it, Timothy the Mouse was giving the pre-ride spiel about keeping your hands and feet inside the ride at all times. I say, hey, that's Daddy's voice. And they're just kind of over it at this point. They're always hearing Daddy say, hey, that's Daddy's voice. Yeah, great, whatever. Can we get cotton candy now? So
that's funny.
I'm thrilled. My kids are less than impressed. I think when they get older, maybe they'll see that there's something to it. And Scuttle was, let's see, I think that was probably 6 or 7 years ago. It might have even been longer than that. But that was one I was really thrilled to get because Buddy Hackett is another comic that I loved
Absolutely.
to watch. I
love
thought
Buddy.
he was hysterical on stage. Yeah, and such a unique voice. And the fact that I was able to do him and be that character is also a real honor. And
Absolutely.
we go, yeah, unfortunately, I took my kids on that ride when they were a bit too young for it, because even the rides that are ostensibly for kids can be a bit loud.
Yeah.
And a little intimidating sometimes, and so they weren't ready for it. So here I am trying to tell them, that's Daddy's voice, and they're just bawling.
Oh.
So I thought, I hope this ride ends soon, because they're not ready for it. They need to be a little bit older.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of voice actors begin to take a renewed interest in some of the work they've done when they have children, because their kids are going to experience it, and they're going to see firsthand how it can impact people, the way that they were impacted themselves as kids. And so one day, my dream is that my kids will be old enough to go on the rides that I've done, to really appreciate not just what I did, but the work that other people put into that. You know, I want them to know there's about 100 or more people that worked on this ride, and Daddy was one of them.
Yeah.
And Daddy's the one you might remember, but this piece of machinery had to be built, and that animation had to be done, and this music had to be scored. So it's easy to make it about you, but then you remember there's a lot of other people made this happen. And I want them to learn that.
Absolutely. Well, the Ariel Grotto ride was amazing. We actually rode that on our honeymoon there at Disney, and it was absolutely a blast. It's such a great ride, and it's just really cool to get to talk with you today, Chris, because, you know, it makes things more realistic for me when I've ridden them or am going to ride them again, or, you know, watch them or play those video games. Whenever I know the voice actor behind the voices of things that I'm into, it just makes it that much more magical and special.
Well, great. I'm glad.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, you know, as a boy growing up, we didn't talk about this. Yeah, we talked more about animation and some of the other things, but as a boy growing up, were you a fan of Star Wars?
Oh, huge fan. I mean, Star Wars came out when I was 8, the original Star Wars, because I'm almost 49 now. And unfortunately, the entire first 3 episodes, 4, 5, and 6, I guess, now they're called A New Hope and Empire and Return of the Jedi, but back then it was just Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and all that. We didn't really call them by their episode numbers, but I had all 3 of those first ones ruined for me in advance by either family or friends that had seen them first.
Oh, no.
And it still, I know, but it still didn't change the fact that they were amazing films.
Right.
And Star Wars blew us away, obviously, because I was 8. And I remember the first I heard of Star Wars was we were in the theater seeing a movie called Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown, which, oddly enough, I have found on YouTube and gotten my kids hugely into. So YouTube is great for finding all the old cartoons that they won't air on TV,
right?
That no network is running, and you can find them for your kids. So we're watching Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown, and they're playing trailers in front of the movie. And we saw a trailer for this movie that was happening in space. And there are all these laser blasts and races through the stars. And then there's this big furry guy who growled like a bear sitting in a cockpit. And I thought, I don't know what this movie is, but I'm going to have to see it. You know?
That's funny.
And that was what the whole theater was kind of thinking, is that what did we just see?
Yeah.
So the trailer knocked us for a loop. And then by the time we saw it, I mean, I saw 5 times in the theater Star Wars, and I saw Empire Strikes Back 5 times in the theater.
Good
I just
Lord.
couldn't get enough of them. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they're so epic, and they were so different from the shiny, clean sci-fi we had before that. You know, they had this grunge and like this used universe that wasn't just all brand new and, you know, shiny, you know, so.
I love that. I love the fact that the Rebels equipment looked like it had just, you know, they'd never had a chance to clean it.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't have the button. They just, they put it together with duct tape.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And it gave such a realism to it that made it like, wow, this could actually be real. You know, like it made that imagination come alive in a way that I don't think sci-fi had ever done before. I know the first times I watched Star Wars, it was just mind blowing.
Yeah, me too.
Well, speaking of Star Wars and your fascination with it, it's really awesome that you got to be a part of Star Wars The Clone Wars as Jedi Master Eth Koth, who actually got to face off against General Grievous. That was absolutely one of my favorite episodes, to get to see that Jedi take on not just Grievous, but his guards and several different Imperial droid types that were there as well. What was it like getting to be a part of the Star Wars universe after being such a fan of it as a boy?
That was another honor. I mean, and it was just a one episode arc. I remember Dave Filoni, the director, told me, he said, "I don't know if we're ever going to bring him back. We haven't decided if we're going to kill him off or not." But I don't think they ever killed him off. It's just the series ended before he had a chance to come back. But it was a simple audition. I learned I got the part, and I didn't have a chance to read with the rest of the cast because I was working on something else. So I came in, and it was just Dave and me. And I think he would cue me, and I'd deliver the lines until he got what he wanted. And then, sometime later I got to see the episode, and yeah, I've gotten to talk with some Star Wars fans and even do an interview or two where we talked about sort of that lightsaber battle.
Yeah. And
it is clear to me that Koth was winning until Grievous cheated, and that was it. So, it's clear to me that Eth was going to finish him off, and Grievous had to cheat a little bit, and so yeah, that's the dark side for you. What can I say?
Well, I thought it was pretty epic because a lot of times when you see Obi-Wan and Anakin, and there's usually like 2 to 5 or more Jedi fighting Grievous, and I mean it was just Eth Koth fighting Grievous in this onslaught of droids, and it's like, dude, that's epic. And they weren't just battle droids; they were like the super stealth battle droids plus his Imperial Guard droids, and I mean it was just like, it was ridiculous. I mean, it was an epic episode, even though you were only in that one. I was really sad to see that series come to an end with the transition of George Lucas selling to Disney, because it was such an amazing series that I absolutely fell in love with, and I think we could have seen Eth Koth come back had that not happened. But life changes and life happens, and we just have to go with the flow, unfortunately.
Right. And you never know. He may come back in some form. Yeah. I have no idea. And whether it's me doing the voice or somebody else doing the voice, it seems to be a character that people like a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't very familiar with him until that episode, but definitely became a huge fan because it was epic. That's for sure. So it's pretty awesome that you got to be a part of the Star Wars universe that you grew up loving. And I mean, for me as a fanboy, I know that just had to be the most epic thing ever to be a part of, not, one, but multiple franchises now, as you've been a part of, Disney and Star Wars and just so many amazing projects throughout your voiceover career.
It is for sure. And I try to remind myself every day that I've definitely got a lot to be thankful for as far as, just life in general is concerned. But in my career, it's worked out better than I could have hoped. And I continue to work and stay busy. I'm very thankful for that. And yeah, it's something that one day when my career winds down, I'll be able to look back and say, yeah, I feel like I achieved just about everything I could have hoped for. And so, yeah, to be in the midst of it and have an appreciation for what I've been able to enjoy is very important to me.
Absolutely. Well, you've done a lot of voice match with characters like, Scuttle, who was done originally by Buddy Hackett, and Timothy the Mouse. And I'm trying to think, even like Yondu from Disney's Infinity 2.0, when they had the character come out. What has it been like for you to voice match so many different characters, and has voice match always kind of been more of your specialty in the voiceover industry?
Yeah, it's strange because a lot of times you don't know that you can do someone's voice because you've never tried it, and then the audition comes along and you realize, oh, okay, well, I guess I could do that voice. I wasn't aware.
Yeah,
but that's part of what a voice match skill set needs to be. The ability to be given something you haven't seen before and adapt on the fly.
Yeah.
And just figure out, okay, what can I change about my voice? How can I contort myself to make this happen? And as far as being able to say that it's my specialty, it's definitely something I have become known for.
Yeah.
But funny enough, I've done probably more commercials than anything else. I mean, I've done about 100 video games, but I think I've done more commercials than that. But
wow.
You'll never know.
Yeah.
Because you tend not to stand out in a commercial. That's the whole point. You're there to serve the company, the product as it is. And in video games, there's so much else going on. A lot of times people won't be aware that it's you. But I suppose if there is a thing that I might be known for, perhaps it is being able to voice match.
Yeah.
But typically, it's a small part of my overall CV. Just because of the amount of things that come along, that people tend not to know about is kind of staggering. That the number of things I audition for on a daily basis tend to be almost 2-to-1 commercials over everything else.
Wow. Okay. And like you said, we just don't always know those as much, because they happen and they come and they go, and boom, you were there and we didn't know it,
Yeah, that's what people will ask me. Oh, you're a voice actor. Have you done anything I would have seen? And then instead of just go down the list, I say, let's just say at some point you've heard my voice, you just didn't know it, and because if you've had the radio on for more than a couple of hours at a time, at some point over the last 15 years, you have probably heard some commercial I've done or the TV, and there are no big awards for that. There's no commercial con that you can go to. Maybe there should be, you know?
Yeah. Well, Chris, before I let you go today, are there any little side projects or things that you're working on that you'd like to share with us before we go?
Sure. Thank you for asking. A lot of colleagues I've noticed always have something creative they have going on the side. I think it's nice to be proactive. Don't wait for the work to come to you. So my brother, Dave, who's a very talented animator, he and I decided we would just do some animated shorts. And we did this, for years. He'd have his computer, and for a while he lived in Florida and I lived out here, and now he lives in Texas. And I would record a voice and I'd send it to him, and he would create this animated character with a 3D program, and he'd animate that character talking to the voice I would send him. And we thought, hey, let's have a little fun with this. I said, what's the easiest thing for you to animate? And he said, something with no arms or legs, because that's the least amount of work. I said, okay. So we came up with this idea of talking glasses in a bar. And we have a little side company called Edgy Brothers. So it's Edgy Brothers Presents. And if you go to edgybrothers.com, we've created this little series of maybe 90-second long short animated clips called Happy Hour. And they're just different kinds of glasses in a bar talking to each other. I do the voices. My brother does the animation. They're fun. They're quick. They're what a friend of mine called snackable content. It's like a little snack you see. You can watch it on your phone and send it to your friends. You can see all that at edgybrothers.com. And we have not safe for work versions and safe for work versions, clean versions and not so clean. So depending on your taste, give it a look at edgybrothers.com.
I love that. What was it called? Snackable what?
Yeah, a friend of mine who's worked in content on for the internet said that's called snackable content. It's a minute long, and you send it to your friends. It's like eating a handful of potato chips, and then you move on with your day. I said, that's pretty much what it is.
That's funny.
If you want a little light, airy diversion of about a minute and a half, check it out.
That's awesome. I will definitely be checking it out. And once again, what was that website so everyone knows, Chris?
Sure. edgybrothers.com, edgybrothers.com, edgybrothers.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Chris. Well, Chris, it's been an amazing chat with you today. I have 2 final questions and we will wrap this interview up. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. The first of the 2 is, what kind of advice would you give to an aspiring actor or actress who might be looking at joining this world of acting, and more specifically the niche of voiceover itself?
Well, you almost answered the question with your question. If you're acting and you want to join voice acting, well, you're already halfway doing it. You need to be an actor. Even if you're just using your voice actors will tell you, technically they just use my voice in the performance, but I use my whole body when I'm voicing it. I gesture. I have to take certain breaths. I stand a certain way. For other jobs, I'll sit. And you have to learn to use your entire body as an instrument of the performance. And you have to use a skill set, which you need to build through being an actor. And so if you want to be a voice actor, be an actor first. Because, yes, you could end up getting just commercial work where maybe you're just reading legalese and you're talking about, just the technical aspects of a commercial's run, now through, June 21st, or for a limited time, enjoy this or this, offer not valid in Texas or Oklahoma, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, there's not acting involved in that. That's a different skill set. But even commercial copy is going to ask you to affect a certain tone to your voice, to be warm and friendly, or to be cocky, or to be scared, or to be nerdy, or whatever it is. All of it involves acting. And so even if friends tell you what great voices you can do or how cool a speaking voice you have, none of that will translate to the work environment unless you have an acting skill set to draw upon, because you're going to have to be able to take direction. You're going to have to be able to sometimes work when you've got a little bit of a cold, and you have to work around limitations.
Yeah.
And you have to actually just get out into the world and live, because the more you live, the more you experience, the better an actor you become, because you have more experience to draw upon. So it's, as a friend of mine, another very successful voice actor once said, people hear voice actor and they think, oh, that's just talking. I do that already. How hard could it be?
Yeah.
Like, well, talking is not hard at all, but acting takes work. And so I would just say, take acting classes, get into live theater, perform in front of an audience, do stand-up if you're so inclined. Try everything you can to learn about yourself as a performer, and use that, because it will serve you very well. And of course, the other things that kind of go without saying, if you're going to audition for things, give it your very best take. Don't do too many takes, because you'll belabor it and then you won't have a fresh perspective on it. And if you're lucky enough to book the gig, do everything you can to be there on time or a little bit early. Take direction well, be pleasant, and when you're done, say thank you and go. They've probably got other people they're bringing in. And, I've at some point or another broken every one of those rules, but every time you break one of those rules, you're not being a complete professional. And so we're all only human, but for the most part, I stick to those rules as much as humanly possible. Get there early or on time, be friendly, be easy to work with, take direction well, and when you're done, say thank you and go about the rest of your day and pat yourself on the back, because it's a hard business. People hear all the time how hard it is, and I'll be the next person to tell you it's very difficult. It's extremely competitive now, much more than it was even 10 or 15 years ago when I started making a name for myself. And so you're going to have to be uber persistent to make your way, but you can.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for that advice. I think it was really solid. And like you said, you have to be an actor first before you can get into voice acting, because it's not just speaking. It does require a lot more than people sometimes understand. But the last and final question I have for you today, Chris, is what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Oh, good question. I would like to think, or I would hope that people found that I did some good work and that I brought some happiness. That really, if you're a performer, if you're an artist, and what we do is our form of art, you want to connect with your audience, whoever that audience may be. And when you connect with an audience, then you make a difference in their day, and you make a difference in yours, And as far as I'm concerned, if I made some people happy, and if I made a difference in how they're able to enjoy something, that's more than enough for me. To touch as many people as you can doing something that you love through your art, that's as good a legacy as I could hope for. And I would wish that my children, whatever they choose to do with their lives, would want the same kind of legacy. With anything they do, that they would give it their best, hope that the work was good, and that other people could connect with it. Simple as that.
I think that's an excellent legacy, Chris. And thank you so much for your time and for giving me some of these amazing behind the scenes stories about some of these amazing and iconic characters you've gotten to voice. And this is just a fraction of what you've done. But thank you so much for giving me some of your valuable time today.
Sure, it was my pleasure.
Well, Chris, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you please give us a special closeout as both Timothy Mouse from Dumbo and Scuttle from The Little Mermaid?
Sure thing. Here's one as Timothy the Mouse for you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening to Trenton and me on Who Did That Voice. And be sure to keep your hands and feet and arms and legs inside the podcast at all times. You never know. Oh, boy!
And how about one as Scuttle?
Ladies and gentle peoples, I want to thank you for taking time out for your land activities to listen to Chris and Trenton on Who Did That Voice. As a matter of fact, I have no idea who did that voice either. I was too busy playing with my snarf brat, which is something that comes from prehistorical times that, you know what, you've heard that explanation before. I'm going to let you go. Have a fantastic day.
Hey, this has been Chris Edgerly on Who Did That Voice.
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Chris Edgerly, the voice of Timothy Mouse from the Dumbo ride, and the voice of Scuttle from Ariel's Undersea Adventure. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. And don't forget to like, comment, and share. For those of you on YouTube, please click the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the little bell notification so you don't miss out on a single episode. I've been your host, Trenton Larkin, and I'll see you next time. You know, a question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us next Friday for our special guest, Tom Mason, a writer for television. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.